Welcome back to
A Local Church Podcast.
Yeah, we got a lot going on today. We're going to look at J.I. Packer's Concise Theology, like
As
we always
per usual.
do. And the John sermon series. I want to
Mhm.
jump into that. And also, I read something today about a guy named Underhill. And no, it's not Lord of the Rings. It's a real dude
Yeah.
connected to the CIA and the JFK
Hey,
files.
we also, I just now remember this, we had some suggestions from a listener about
Nice.
how we could possibly improve.
Welcome to the show.
You're listening to a local church podcast hosted by my dad, Pastor Ryan Markham. Be sure to leave a review and share this resource. Love God, love people, make disciples.
Hey, you got your bracket filled out?
My March
they start
Madness,
tomorrow.
no.
Tonight's your last night to start a bracket.
I used to be way into college basketball. I just haven't been in the last few years.
Well, you need to.
I'll do it. It's fun.
Today, we already mentioned a little bit of it. There's a whole lot to talk about in a really short amount of time, but I think we can get it all in. And there's something more you just pulled up as we get ready to record. One more scenario, one more topic.
Yeah.
Which I think is good. We should probably we'll leave that for the last.
Okay.
And we'll start with, like we normally do, J.I. Packer's Concise Theology, which is neither concise nor whatever, but it is theology, right? And so today's topic, 46, the Transfiguration, subheading or subtopic, how Jesus Christ's glory was revealed. Mark 9, 2-4. And after 6 days, Jesus took him, Peter, and James, and John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely white, as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus.
All right, first question. Do
Yeah.
you think Moses and Elijah saw Peter, James, and John there?
That's a good question.
Because clearly they saw them.
I'm going to answer your question with a question.
Okay.
If you were being led up a mountain with Jesus, right? And then all of a sudden this happens, put yourself in Moses's and Elijah's shoes. If you were face to face with Jesus, would you be worried about anybody else?
No.
So maybe, right? Maybe not. But Moses and Elijah, I think at that point, know who Jesus really is.
Yeah, because they're the one that
He
they,
is God
that they
in the
prophesied
flesh,
about.
right? And so it's like, did they see Peter? And maybe it was so bright that just the illumination for Elijah and Moses was Jesus. It was God in the
blinded everything
flesh,
else.
right? Dimmed everything else. I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't thought about it like that ever.
I mean,
Ever.
it doesn't
Ever.
affect anything. It's not salvific or anything.
And
But
how cool would it be that you would be in that little 3 inner circle with Jesus and like, I got to see Moses and Elijah.
I got to see the Christ transfigured, let alone
Yeah. I mean, just
Moses and Elijah.
I mean, they were with him in the flesh. They still didn't get it,
Yeah.
right? Until after the resurrection. But, oh man, the guys that you were reading about who prophesy about the guy you were hanging out with, and they are there in the same room, like,
Right.
or the same, I guess, space. Matthew 17, verse 1 through 8 talk about the same moment, right? But Matthew says, and he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. So a little bit different than Mark, but it's bright.
Yeah.
Super bright. So what happened? Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up to a mountainside, and he was glowing before them, right? It's just this moment of a transfiguration, right? A transformation, but figuration of his glory. Here he is. Jesus is God in the flesh. He's the one that the whole Old Testament is written about. He is it, right?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm pretty sure he talks about Hebrews 1:3, right? Which is Shannon's favorite verse. But I
J.I.
think it's
Packer?
appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, he does mention it.
Okay. Because I got to read it. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. The point being,
Yeah, the very beginning.
he is the radiance of the glory of God.
Yeah. And then in the book of Revelation, like, we will not need light because God is our light.
Yeah.
Right? It's insane about how bright this is. But think about Moses, who saw this light up on a mountainside,
Mhm.
and he's like, "Just let me see you." And he's like, "Look, if people see me, you're gonna die." And Moses kept pressing it, and he was like, "Okay, turn around, and I'm gonna walk behind you."
I'm going to put you between these two rocks first.
Yeah, and he comes down, and he's glowing with radiation from God,
Yeah.
and people are scared of Moses, right?
Hey, man,
and
can you veil your face?
and
It's a little bright.
Elijah, what happened to Elijah? Elijah was taken up by
A flaming chariot.
a chariot.
Dude,
like,
how
it's like,
cool is that?
yeah, there's a lot going on there, and Peter, James, and John, the guys that they've been reading about, and the one who they've been following are all there together. It's got to be a huge moment. And then God the Father speaks from a cloud, similar to how he did at the baptism,
Yeah.
right? Hey, this is my son. This is my beloved son. And it's like, okay, if you don't get it by then, right? If you're
Right.
Peter, James, and John, man, think about their lives. Peter, right, denies Christ. He's reinstated by Christ, but he denies Christ even before at the resurrection, right? And he's been privy to this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he
Anything-
was the one that walked on water before he fell in.
What about Jesus' brothers, right? John chapter 7.
Uh-huh.
There is a passage that talks about Jesus' brothers, and they're trying to get him to do something, almost like poking fun at him, and he doesn't do what they do, what they tell him to do. But do you have the passage pulled up?
Yeah,
Or
I'll
not?
go. So 7:3 specifically says, "So his brothers said to him, 'Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing.'"
Yeah, keep going. Keep reading.
Okay. Give me just one.
Oh, sorry. I'll finish it.
Yeah, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world.
Yeah.
For not even his brothers believed in him.
Yeah, even his own brothers were like, "Hey, Jesus, go do this thing. If you want to be known, like if you really want people to know you and be popular." The context here is they're trying to get him to go to this Feast of Tabernacles.
Yeah.
To go out, like just to be public about who he is, and I guess seek attention, popularity, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so even the brothers of Jesus don't really get who he is. Peter denies even after he's seen all these things. I don't know how that's possible after the transfiguration, right? Or at the transfiguration, like seeing Jesus do the things that he did and then still not believe or still
Right.
like,
Well, you've got to think there were also other magicians, quote unquote,
yeah,
in the Old Testament and the New Testament
yeah. So this
doing things.
this moment was huge, right?
Yeah.
In the life of Jesus, especially those three, Peter, James, and John.
Mhm.
And J. Packer says some things. Let's just unpack some of the things he talks about.
Unpack it, unjay it.
Recorded in the three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and evidently planned by Jesus for Peter, James, and John to see, and later to testify about. So they all went back and testified.
Yep.
Matthew, John, and 2 Peter talk about it. The Transfiguration was a significant event in the revelation of Jesus' deity. John writes about the testimony after the fact. He doesn't write about the moment itself.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. But it's so that we know who Jesus is. All the Gospels point to something about Jesus. He's the Son of God, right? He's the Messiah. He's the one who was prophesied about. He's the one, right? All the Gospels point to Jesus. John specifically points to him being God in the flesh, right?
Mhm.
Who dwells among us. He's the Son of God. He's the Son of Man. All these things. And this moment is big. If I'm going to give you the actual chapters and verses, so you can go back and look at it. Matthew 17, 1 through 8, Mark 9, 2 through 8, Luke 9, 28 through 36. So you can go back and look at those passages specifically so you can get a better understanding of it. J. Packer writes, "The bright light that shone from Jesus through his clothes as his face changed was the glory intrinsic to him as the divine Son." Like you read from Hebrews,
Okay. It does go there.
The radiance of the glory of God. The voice from a cloud confirmed the identification that the vision was already given, right? That he is the Son of God. He is God in the flesh.
Yeah.
It's him. It's a big moment. I keep saying it's a big moment, right?
It's
And
huge.
It's a moment beyond our moments, and we almost read over it like this. Oh, yeah. Remember the Transfiguration?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that time that Jesus showed he was God and
Yeah.
became so bright that it blinded.
I think it's almost like we are numb to some of the things we read in the Bible because
Yeah.
like we've read them over and over, or
Or
we've read them
heard them.
before, or heard them sermons, heard Bible studies and we're like, oh yeah, remember that time Jesus just changed his face and everything shown and Moses and Elijah was there? Yeah, remember that? Yeah, cool.
Well, kind of like what we were talking about before we started, whenever Jesus is folding the facial cloth.
Oh yeah.
It's like one of those moments.
Yeah, that's a good little tidbit of teaser. We're gonna get into that in the sermon series, but it's those little moments where like, just read over it,
right?
And we don't really think about it. But the moment that this happened, the Transfiguration had to be something out of craziness, right? Think about like, did time stop in that moment for Peter, James, and John?
Yeah.
Because Moses and Elijah, who were not existent in the time of the day, show up, right? I'm just saying, time and space is probably affected in that moment.
They're also from two different timelines themselves.
Yeah. Oh, man. Beautiful. All right. J.I. Packer keeps going. The Transfiguration was also a significant event. Duh. In the revelation of God's kingdom. So in the timeline of God's kingdom, he puts a lot of parentheses in this spot. Trying to get through it. Moses and Elijah represented the law and the prophets, witnessing to Jesus and being superseded by him. The departure, the exodus of which they and Jesus talked, must have been his death, resurrection, and ascension.
Ooh.
Think about the talking of things to come and his return. Like, there's a lot going on here that's talking about. And what do you think Peter, James, and John are doing? You think they're like frozen in time? Are they taking notes? Are they listening? Are they like
obviously they weren't taking
baffled,
notes.
Right? Well, they write about it.
I mean, yeah. Well,
but mental notes, right?
Yeah.
But what could they possibly be doing in this moment?
Just being awestruck. I mean, what let's say you're there and you see Jesus, Moses, and Elijah.
Yeah.
What do? You're like, take it in the moment.
It's
taking selfies.
It's a moment, right? I don't take many selfies. After the Transfiguration, J. Packer writes, Jesus veiled his glory and went down from the mountain to minister once more, and in due course suffer for our salvation. F.B. Meyer is quoted by Packer, the door through which Moses and Elijah had come stood open, and by it our Lord might have returned, but he could never, under those circumstances, have been the Savior of mankind. He knew this, so he set his face toward Calvary. The door,
there's a lot there.
The door that was opened before Moses and Elijah, right? God opened this door for this moment. Jesus was ready for this moment. He brings his inner circle to this moment.
Yeah.
Jesus could have went back with Moses and Elijah, is what he's saying. F.B. Meyer. But Jesus instead chose Calvary instead of comfort, right?
Yeah.
His heavenly home. It's a lot. It's a lot here to the Transfiguration. Go back and read those and think about the moment where the disciples actually get to see, I mean, they've been with Jesus, right? And now they get to see this moment. And then from that moment, from the Transfiguration, it's all going towards the cross, right? It's all pointing towards salvation for all who would believe, right? In his powerful atoning sacrifice, but also his resurrection, and then his eventual return. Cool moment. We talked a little bit before. Time and space.
Yeah.
Big time and space fan. I like black holes.
Interstellar.
Well, all that good stuff. Where are Moses and Elijah before the Transfiguration? Did they just die? Or not Elijah, right? Are they in this holding area? Are they in paradise with God?
Holding area implies purgatory.
Yeah.
We're not talking about purgatory.
I would say yes, right, to all those answers. Not purgatory, right?
Right.
But I don't know the name of it. And if somebody's listening and you can look at this up, I could probably do the work. I probably should have done it for the podcast.
Yeah.
There's a theological idea that at the time when the Old Testament believers died, and then say I were to die today in 2025, it's the same instance because death is outside of time. I'm limited by the time I have here on earth. I'm walking through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? There's hours, minutes, seconds. But the moment you die, you are outside of time, correct? We would agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, and so if Moses and Elijah are outside of time, God himself is outside of time. At the moment of their death on earth, how does that work when there's no time? and then I die, all the saints will rise with Christ at his return, right? And so it's like, how does time work? Does time work the same way?
You know what I just thought about that might throw
a monkey wrench in that understanding? What?
Think about I think it's Matthew's gospel, that whenever Jesus, before the resurrection, is it before the resurrection? There's an earthquake and the dead come out of the tombs.
That's at the crucifixion. That's before the resurrection.
Yeah.
And so there's this earthquake, right? The moon goes dark, and the dead rise.
Yeah.
Right?
So, do those dead? Are there now souls, or are they just bodies?
It doesn't say. It just says they walk around and people see them. Like they're seen throughout the city.
Because if that happens, then
we talked. I think did we talk about this before? Like they're the Walking Dead, right?
Sorry if Luke is listening. Sorry for the reference to the past podcast.
Yeah. It's like the Walking Dead, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like think about it. I mean, Elijah didn't die and he's with Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? Moses did die and he's with Jesus.
But then who are the martyrs that are talked about in Revelation that are crying out like, "Hey, hurry up."
I think the martyrs
where are they at?
I think the martyrs. So there's a lot going on, right, throughout the entire Bible itself.
Yeah.
With those who have died and those who come back with Jesus, right? The saints that arrive with him at his return, the saints that are caught up in the air with the dead in Christ already, right? The saints that are still living are caught up in the air. Like there's a lot going on. But I don't think time is relevant at death. I don't think time is a thing that we're going to think about.
Because we can't conceptualize it when we're dead.
Yeah, just think about when Christ comes back. There's a new heaven, new earth. Is time going to exist in those places? Well, it doesn't have to because God is our light.
In eternity.
Yeah, because you can't count eternity, right?
No.
There's no reason to have a clock for eternity because it doesn't exist.
Here's another verse, by the way, that I'll just say. Yeah. 2 Corinthians 5:8, absent from the body, present with the Lord.
Yeah, I like it. Paul says, to live as Christ, to die as gain.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to look at. I probably should have did it for the podcast.
Maybe that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, look that up. If you're listening to this podcast and you're like, "What does happen to time?" Do some research. Give us a comment. Leave an email at localchurchpodcast
@gmail. Right?
Yeah. .com. This brings us to our second segment of the day, our current sermon series.
John,
the Gospel of John. We started chapter 2 this past Sunday, and first impression, initial thoughts, go.
Initial thoughts on, let me pull, I always got to go to my notes.
So just to give you a rundown, John chapter 2 is the first of Jesus' miracles, signs that John calls them. John is writing so that we would believe. The listener would believe that Jesus is the Son of God. He is who he says he is. He is who the Bible says he is, right? And he turns water into wine at a wedding in Cana.
Not grape juice.
First thoughts on the sermon.
Yeah. So it was good. The theme that you brought out I thought was awesome. It says Jesus' first miracle at the wedding in Cana reveals his glory and foreshadows his ultimate work of redemption.
And I think I tied it up in the end, the redemption part, right? Like it wasn't really about the wine. It's pointing to something else, right?
Yeah. So a few things that I got. Christ hallowed marriage by his presence and honored it with his first miracle. And that was a quote by Calvin.
Yeah.
Marriage is a metaphor for the relationship with his people. I wrote down Revelation 19:9 and just in parentheses put sheesh.
The wedding feast, right, of the Lamb. Jesus as the groom and the church as his bride. There's this big wedding feast in Revelation that's mentioned. Marriage is a big theme all throughout Scripture, right?
If you don't know what Revelation 19:9 is, I'm going to read it because I was oh boy.
Did it start in 9 or start in 7?
I can
start in 7. Does that make sense or no?
I'd have to start at 6.
Okay, do that.
So it says, then I heard what seemed to be the voice of a great multitude, like the roar of many waters, and the sound of mighty peals of thunder.
You could also say tribes, tongues, and nations. Go ahead.
Okay. Hallelujah! For the Lord our God, the Almighty, reigns. Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure. For the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. This is verse 9. And the angel said to me, write this. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. Whoa.
Yeah. It's big. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And marriage is a union between, or it points to Christ and the church, right? His people. And so that's the kind of thing we brought up in the beginning. He hallows this, John Calvin's quote, he hallowed this first marriage.
And who are the blessed? It's the ones that are invited to the marriage supper.
Yeah, it's a big deal. The question that I got, before I even got up on to deliver the sermon, our life groups are going through similar passages, John 2, and one of our members was like, hey, if getting drunk is a sin, why would Jesus' first miracle be changing water into wine as tempting people to get drunk?
Right, but God does not tempt them.
Yeah, and so I kind of mentioned at the beginning, right?
I appreciated that you unpacked all that, by the way.
It's not about the wine. It's about something greater, right? Mm-hmm. Can Jesus supply our needs physically? Yes. But he's really more interested in your spiritual need, right? Yeah. Which is the salvation that comes through his work, right? The shedding of his blood, which
and recognizing that he is God.
Yeah, which is pointing to the Lord's Supper, right? The new covenant that Jesus brings in with the shedding of his blood, the wine. Hey, when you take this wine for the Lord's Supper, it's in remembrance of what I'm doing, right? Yeah. I'm pouring out myself for the forgiveness of sins. But there's a lot in that passage, right? Mary is invited, Jesus is invited, the disciples are invited to this wedding. It's a small town of Cana, right? Nazareth is a small town. Everybody knows everybody. And they run out of wine, right? And it's a big deal in Jewish society. The groom's family takes care of everything, not the bride like we do now. And if they were to run out of supply, run out of whatever, the party wasn't good, they could be sued by the bride's family.
I did not
know
that.
They could be shamed.
Crazy.
The new bride and groom could have been shamed for the rest of their existence there in Cana. It was a small town, right? Small town stuff. You know everything that's going on.
Yeah, you made the connection to Mount Eden. Like, hey, if you've done something here,
everybody knows, right? Yeah. Everybody knows your past, and it was a big deal to run out. And Mary, who has known Jesus, right? Angels have talked to her about Jesus. The shepherds, the wise men. She has seen him grow in wisdom and stature. When he was left at the temple, right? She knows all these things about Jesus, and so she goes to Jesus, like, hey, he can fix this. It's a big moment. It's a cool moment. Yeah. And how did you remember how he responded?
Woman.
Yeah, he called his mom woman. Now,
everybody knows as a disrespectful term.
Do not call your mom woman, right? But in Jewish circles, right, it was a respectful term. It's the same term he used at the cross when he was hanging there, and he says, woman, this is your new son, or this is now your son. He calls Mary Magdalene the same name. He calls the woman at the well in John chapter 4 by woman, right? It's a respectful term. But it's also a distancing term for Jesus and Mary. He's saying, you are my mother, but I now need you to see me as Messiah, right? You are now a disciple, right?
Yeah.
It's a big moment. Like, I can imagine being Mary and your kid growing up and like, hey, I don't need a hug before I go to school, Mom. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like one day Braden will grow up and be his own man, and he'll be like, give me a handshake instead of, a daddy hug, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It's probably a pretty emotional moment for her. But the very next statement that she makes is she turns to the servants of the party and is like, do whatever he tells you to do, go for it, right? And so it's like she's not offended in a sense, but she's like, oh yeah, he's the guy, like he's the Messiah, right? Almost probably like full circle for her, right? The angel said, this is Emmanuel, God in the flesh.
Yeah.
Like, and now it's like this moment of like, hey, Mom, I'm the Messiah, right? Like now you address me.
In case you forgot.
Well, now you address me as a follower, right? That kind of thing. Like,
man, you should have brought that out instead.
It would have been cool,
too.
but
it
was
nice.
It was probably been all clicky, right, at that moment for her, and she's like, do whatever he says.
That was her transfiguration
because
moment.
She remembers all the stuff that was going on, right? That kind of thing. And so he says, hey, go get those 6 stone jars. They hold 20 to 30 gallons. After all said and done, it's about 180 gallons of new awesome wine, right?
Yeah.
And the stone jars are, John writes in detail about things that we don't often pick up on. Stone jars, he even tells us, are used for purification. Another symbolism thing that Jesus picks these stone jars, pointing to something greater. It's not about the outside of the cup anymore, right? Jewish circles, stone jars, the water that was in there was supposed to be clean for purification before you eat, before you do any kind of religious things, anything like that. Jesus could have chose old wine jars, but he didn't, right? He chose something for purification, which is telling of what this is really about. And then he says, now draw it out and go take it to the host. And it's like the best wine ever.
Yeah, the hosts were like, whoa, where'd this come from?
Yeah, host goes to the groom and is like, hey, how cool are you? You saved the best for last, right? That kind of thing. And you have to go back to the same question. Why would Jesus do this? Well, one, it shows his abundant grace, right? That he is the provider, right? We turn to him for our needs, not just physical, but spiritual, because it's pointing to something greater. I drew out the purification part where Jesus would later condemn the Pharisees as like, hey, you're worried about the outside of the cup, but you're missing the point, right? It's about what's on the inside.
Yeah, don't be a whitewashed tomb.
And I don't know if that came out clearly in the sermon.
I made sure to make a note of it.
But it was, I was trying to connect, like, there's so many, like the marriage thing, you got to connect it, you got to connect the purification. Like, there's so many things to connect in what John's writing, because we read it, like we've said, we read the Bible like, oh, it's just another thing.
Yeah.
But John writes very specific detail about everything that happens. And
I made sure to note also that you had said that the world offers fulfillment, quote unquote, but Jesus offers
the best.
I put full fulfillment.
Yeah, that's good. That's probably been better words, right? Abundance, right?
Yeah.
He offers abundant life, things like that. Saving the best for last. Why would Jesus give the greatest wine? Because he is the creator, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about who's doing it. And I mispronounced a Greek term of created out of nothing, right? You want to help the listener understand what ex
nihilo.
Yeah, I went crazy country on it. I'm not going to do it. You can go back.
Full Mount Eden.
You can go look at Facebook for our church for that. But anyway, Jesus created this great, awesome wine. You're like, well, he created it out of water. No, he created it from empty stone jars, and he told the disciples, hey, the servants of the party, just fill it with water, and then now draw some out, and it's wine instantly, right? He didn't put ingredients in there. There was no dry food
he didn't have
packets,
to press it.
Right? I mean, it was out of nothing that Jesus did this. And I try to connect, hey, the world offers you what's best now, right?
Yeah.
Like all the temptations, all the trappings, money, power, whatever it is, popularity, all those good things, only for it to disappoint you, and you got to chase after something else.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus offers the best later. Like, your life can be good now, or it can be great in his presence, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So don't chase after the wrong thing. I don't know if it. Again,
I must have missed that part.
I try to pull so much things. I try to put a lot of things together through study, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then try to okay, how do I apply these things? And man, this sermon was 10 pages compared to normal 7 or 8 pages.
I remember before the sermon, I stepped into your office and you were like, I'm trying to get it down to 7 from 10.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Then,
I got down to 9.
Yeah, then you were like, I got to 9. I was like,
I got to 9, and
it's hard because there's so much there.
Yeah, and I didn't finish the 4th point really. I just kind of cut it off pretty quick.
And there's also often times where, I mean, even specifically for John chapter 1, I was like, oh boy, how long is it going to take for us to get just through John chapter 1?
I mean, we took 6 weeks on John chapter 1, I think.
Yeah. And even then, I was like, you could just take John 1:1 and do multiple sermons.
Yeah, I mean, pull a Spurgeon who did 20 sermons on one verse or something. It was insane.
Crazy.
Yeah, you could do that. But I think.
But
you'd lose everybody. I think because what's the main point? The main point of John is that you would believe.
Yeah.
All the things that we're going to walk through is just that you would believe that Jesus is who he says he is. And that's where we're going. That's the whole idea that I'm using for the sermon series.
And rounding it out, at least the last thing that I had on here was that specifically you'd made mention hey, am I going to condemn you for drinking? No, but I'm not going to do it around somebody who has maybe a problem.
So we have to address this, right? Paul in Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 8 talks about eating what's clean and unclean, right? In the sight of whoever is doing it. There are folks who would say drinking alcohol is not a sin, right? And there are folks who would say drinking alcohol is a sin in the same church, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're listening to this, you go to church, you got those two opinions in your church, right? There's nobody in the middle. And we see clearly Paul writing that drinking by itself is not a sin. Drunkenness is a sin, right? It's in the list of those who will not enter the kingdom of God, right? And so from the pulpit, I said, I cannot condone drinking, right? Because I've seen the effects of alcohol in families and things like that. But I will also not judge you if you decide to drink. What I will say is the drunkenness part is what we need to address, right? That kind of stuff. That's a big thing for a lot of folks. A lot of different commentaries. Even Spurgeon would jump into this and say, well, the alcohol that were in Jesus' day wasn't like really alcohol like our day, that kind of thing. And I want to say, who's the one creating the wine? It's Jesus. It's really good. And the host is like, you've saved the best wine until last, right? Like it's
unless he's just talking about the flavor of the wine, which I doubt.
It's the abundance. Like the power of God is inexhaustible, right? And so what he creates is good. And even in this instance, the wine that he created was probably really good, right? But he also wouldn't condone drunkenness, right? This was a celebration between a man and a woman, right? In the sight of God, in the presence of Jesus, and he's there providing what is needed. And so the application would be like, do I go to Jesus? Do I trust Jesus enough to take care of my needs, right? Mm-hmm. Physical and spiritual. Spiritual is the biggest problem, right? Now I can go to Jesus and be like, I'm running behind on bills. I need your help. Jesus, tell me what to do. Point me in the right direction for all those good things, right? Whatever that is. Can he supply that? Sure. But that's not your greatest problem, right? The greatest problem is salvation, is forgiveness of sins, and then that new life, right? The new life that he gives, but he gives it in abundance, right? He doesn't offer new life and like, okay, now here's a bunch of rules to follow.
Right.
It's, here's a new life, live it for my glory, right? That kind of thing. And I think the water of the wine is just that. It's God's abundant grace that's to meet our needs, right? Yeah, I would say that. But that's hard. Alcoholism is really hard. I mean, you think about like the other question is like, well, what about the deacons that go behind the church and smoke, right? Isn't that a sin? It's not a sin to smoke, right? Is it bad for your health? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? You're taking something that was good, that created by God, and doing something with it that it wasn't intended to be, right? Mm-hmm. And so the same thing is with the fruit of the vine, right?
So I'm assuming you don't drink, period.
I do not drink. Now I know pastors that drink, on occasion with meals.
Drink, not drunk.
Yeah, meals and things like that. I would not condone it just because there may be someone in our church that's like has a really bad problem with alcoholism.
Yeah.
And that's a stumbling block. But now I wouldn't also go around and be so judgmental about people that do drink to shun them from the church either, right? I would say playing with any of those things to the point of addiction or drunkenness, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a line you don't want to go near, right?
So,
and I think tempting someone to do that, or to even say, yeah, it's good for you to do that or go for it, I think that's too much of a temptation for some folks.
I'm curious about this then, because I don't think it was talked about before I was hired on here. If, let's say you found a bottle of wine or something like that over at the house, is that cause for you to be like, hey, get that out? Or
so I would say,
because the closest thing to wine over at the house is a white wine vinegar.
So a lot of people cook with it, right? That kind of thing. I would say if you do things like that. Now again, I'm not going to put legalistic restrictions on our parishioners, right? Our folks that come to church. I would say you probably don't want to be doing that in front of someone or using it in front of someone else that may have that issue of addiction, things like that.
Yeah, don't be the stumbling block.
Yeah. Your pastor is not going to go to your house and be like, show me your cupboards, right? All that things. That's between you and God. However, if you're stuck in an addiction, and it doesn't have to be alcohol, it can be anything, right? Maybe you're stealing, and that's an addiction, right? You need to confess that and move forward, right?
Yes.
Period.
And I'm just saying this.
Yeah.
I don't have anything over there, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, I can't condone nor can I judge.
Yeah. I can
discipline if it's drunkenness, right?
Yeah.
If it's something that's dividing our church.
Yeah. I think one of the main reasons I never got into drinking. I've had drinks before, but I've never been drunk. But now, with where I'm at, one of the main reasons I probably wouldn't have alcohol in general is because we have the youth over quite often. I don't want them to think anything.
Well, look at the
wrong.
passage for elders, right? The qualifications for elders. It's above reproach, right? If someone were to come to my house and they see alcohol, they may not judge, but then in the back of their head, they're like, our pastor drinks, right?
Yeah.
And what is associated with drinking? Partying, things like that, drunkenness.
Unfortunately,
I don't want our folks to think of my name in that light, right? And so to be above reproach is to not give anybody a reason to think that I'm doing anything, sinful or nefarious.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wouldn't condone it from our pulpit ever. People have asked me, it comes up in all the communion circles, right? The communion debates, like, hey, do you guys use wine or grape juice?
Yeah.
If you use grape juice, you're not following the Bible, things like that. It's like, I get it. But I don't really want to get pulled into those kind of circular debates that never end. It's like, look, I'm not tempting my folks that there may be issues with alcoholism, right? I don't want to tempt people like that. Yeah. Anything else with that one?
No, that was good. I appreciated that.
That's a big one. So the chapter 2, now we're getting ready to go into the temple. Jesus immediately goes from his first miracle into clearing out the temple with a whip.
Oh boy.
And
flipping tables.
Folks buying and selling animals used for the sacrifices, for spiritual things in the temple, and Jesus cleans house. Yeah.
To say it lightly.
Yeah, so we're going to look at that. But do I trust Jesus for my needs, right? That's a big one that came out of Sunday. And am I waiting for the best? The world's going to offer our folks all kinds of promises that it's not going to uphold.
Yeah.
And Jesus offers the best, right? That's the only thing I can get at, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully that's good. And then how does that help us understand John's thesis of
the overarching thing?
Yeah. How does this miracle help me to believe that Jesus is who he says he is? Because he did something no one else could do. Right? In abundance.
Power over nature.
Yeah. Big deal. Are you into conspiracy theories?
Am I into conspiracy theories?
The JFK files have been released again. I guess it's been released a couple of times, and
there have been some
redacted heavily, and now we've got all of it. How many pages? 50,000, 80,000?
70 to 80,000.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Ridiculous.
But I teased the beginning of this is who is Underhill, right? And if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you know that Frodo uses the name Underhill. Yep. But this is not that guy. Richard Case, is it Nagel, was an intelligence officer with connections to the JFK assassination theories. However, another key figure, Richard E. Sprague, referenced Underhill in a connection to CIA involvement. I have the paper in front of me in a picture form.
I had to stop reading it.
And I didn't let you read it. But in a new declassified document, this name Underhill is huge. Are you ready?
I'm so ready for this.
So, again, this is the subject says John Garrett Underhill, and then it has comma, Samuel George Cummings, and then Inter Armco, which I don't even know what that is, but besides the point. This is from 19 July 1967, the day after the assassination of JFK. Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Late in the evening, he showed up at a home of friends in New Jersey. He was very agitated. A small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, he confided, and he was afraid for his life and probably would have to leave the country. This is what he said to friends. Less than 6 months later, wouldn't you know, Underhill was found shot dead in his Washington apartment. The coroner ruled it suicide.
Did you all hear that entire story?
Yeah, here we go. J. Garrett Underhill has been an intelligence agent during World War II and was a recognized authority on limited warfare and small arms. A researcher and writer on military affairs, he was on a first-name basis with many of the top brass in the Pentagon. He was also on intimate terms with a number of high-ranking CIA officials. He was one of the agency's people who performed special assignments. At one time, he had been a friend of Samuel Cummings of Inter-Armco, which that's probably going to be, the arms broker that numbers among its customers the CIA.
Uh-oh.
And ironically, Klein Sporting Goods of Chicago. Not sure why that's in there.
Because Chicago's the worst.
But there's a lot with this guy, Underhill, and his involvement with the CIA and arms dealers. JFK was a big guy against war, against the war machine, right? That kind of thing. And now you have this Underhill saying it was a small group of the CIA, and then he's found shot.
Which, by the way, him saying it was a small group implies that there was not just one shooter, a.k.a. Lee Harvey Oswald.
I mean, it was a team, right? Assuming... There's some more, right? Underhill claimed that high-level intelligence officers planned Kennedy's removal.
Yeah.
Right? Conspiracy theories, suggest Kennedy's stance on the Federal Reserve, Vietnam, and the CIA's power made him a target. Do you remember the quote?
I was going to ask you to pull it up
JFK?
again. Yes.
Here it is. I will splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the wind. Now, when you give a man power, he doesn't want to give that power up.
Yeah.
Right? The CIA has a lot of power around the world, not just in the United States. Now, again, I am in no way connected to the CIA, the government, anything like that.
What?
I have to put forward that my thoughts are my own and that I do not represent any government agency.
You represent yourself
in this
and
moment.
yourself alone.
This is just me talking about a conspiracy theory about a guy named Underhill and the JFK assassination. It's big. What could this possibly mean for a local church, right? We're hearing it all on social media, and JFK. We've heard it for like years, right?
Yeah.
Since the time he was, like, since the day he was assassinated, people were like, "Oh, it's the government. Oh, it's this guy. Oh, it's not. It's not." And conspiracy theory after another about JFK. What should a local church? How should we respond to this popular topic of theories?
Watch this.
Yeah.
Trust in Christ alone.
Nice. Yeah. That's
Don't
it.
put your trust in the government.
I would say that's big, right? Because I think there's things that go on in our government around the world that we don't know about, and then if we were to find out about them, it would shake our falling in line to authorities that are over us, things like that. There's a lot to that. Trust Jesus over horses and chariots.
Submit to the government until the government tells you to do something that would subvert your faith in Christ.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. Romans, right?
Yeah.
Paul writes, hey, we're all subject to the authority. Authority is given to man by God himself.
They wouldn't be there without God.
It is a tool by God for righteousness and justice. Now, however, does that mean that the government always acts righteously or justly?
No.
But unless they say stop worshiping, right? Unless they say, deny Jesus, unless they say you can't have a Bible, things like that, like, we are to be subject to the authorities that are over us, even when they're dumb, in an instance like what we're reading about now, right?
When they're dumb.
I would say that. Charles Spurgeon has a quote: "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes."
Ooh, that's good. I've never heard that.
I don't know if he came up with that or if he's quoting another quote, but a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes.
Would it surprise you if it was? Would it surprise you if it was just originally from him, though? Honestly.
No.
Yeah, right.
I would say, look at social media, right? All the stuff that's going on with the JFK files. It's distracting. I mean, but it's also intriguing. But it has traveled around the world in an instant on social media, and I'm sure the powers that be are trying to put together the narrative, right, that they want the American people to believe.
Yeah.
While all this stuff is going rampant, like, I think there's some truth to conspiracy theories, right? I mean, think about myths, right? There's some truth to myths, not all myths, right? But they come from somewhere. They derive from something somewhere, right? similar to the Garden of Eden, God said, hey, don't eat from this tree or you will die.
Mm-hmm.
And Satan twists this truth into a myth and say, did God really say that, right? And then twist this, you'll be like God, right? All those things. And conspiracy theories are the same way, right? There's a hint of truth to them. We don't really often know it until much later.
Now we do.
Yeah, I think this one, you have 80,000 pages to go look at, right? I'm sure you can all go look at it.
I'm waiting for the Bigfoot files to come out.
I don't think anything's going to
No.
But I think there is some truth to some really dark stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to connect it to the assassination of Trump, but I'm going to connect it. I didn't want to, but there's the powers that be, right? Want to keep power, want to keep money, want to keep influence.
I mean,
and when you shake things up like JFK was going to try to do, they weren't going to stand for it.
You know about what happened with the kid, right? He was nowhere to be found on social media. His house was professionally scrubbed.
Oh, the one that was on the roof. Yeah.
He was out there with a rangefinder.
We still don't know anything about.
Nothing.
And even the guy that was found not murdered, not shot, whatever, at the golf course.
Yeah.
Right. He's just imprisoned, and we don't know anything. We still don't know anything.
No.
6 cell phones? Why do you need 6 cell phones? Right. Who gave him all that?
Yeah, and then the last calls from supposedly this kid's phone was like connected to somebody in government, and then like he had connections with BlackRock, and it just goes deep. It goes so deep. Conspiracy theories are so much fun.
So we've talked about why does this matter for the church is trust Jesus.
Yeah.
Not for everything else, for your needs, right? Spiritual needs, things like that. But also the truth matters for Christians, right? We stand on truth. We claim to know the truth. We know what the Bible says, right? And we know that it is true. And all other truths should be filtered through what Scripture says.
Yes.
And so even when it comes to conspiracy theories, they're fun, but they're also distracting, right? You can spend the rest of your life looking at 80,000 pages.
You can go down
if
the
you
X
want
rabbit
to,
hole.
If you want to do that, go for it. But it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
We know that Jesus is who he says he is. He's coming back. And I want to devote my time to that and not things that are just distracting.
Mm.
It's fun to think about, but it's really not going to change your life in any way. Is knowing what happened to JFK going to change my life?
No.
Yeah, probably not.
No.
It's not going to do anything.
No.
Other than some people might be more leery of authority, right?
But at that,
yeah,
like most people are probably already pretty wary.
Yeah. Nice. So this last segment where we just added because you gave a little teaser, but has anyone heard about a guy named Butch and a lady named Suni?
What?
Back to Earth. That's their names. The astronauts that were left in space.
I didn't know their names.
by the last administration, and this administration used with the help of SpaceX.
Yeah,
brought them home.
Yeah, dude. So I didn't realize they were there for that long. They were there for 9 months.
Yeah, so
almost a year.
One of the news stations interviewed a couple of astronauts that were only in space for like 7 days, and they were like, "What's the effects?" And the guys were like, "Look, it took us a couple months to get back to normal. We don't know what it's going to be like for people that have been in space for 9 months.
Gosh.
Like the amount of heaviness your body would feel, with gravity and
Just
all.
feel weird.
There's got to be some health concerns there. I mean, and radiation is in space. Like they're all around.
Yeah. You've got no protection.
Radiation. It's like something's got to be
Not
off.
only that, you're also affected by time. To bring it back to the time talk.
Nice.
I don't remember when this happened, but they did a study where like they started a stopwatch on Earth, and then the people that went in space, when they came back, their time, like we had moved faster through time here on Earth than what they were doing in space.
Nice.
Crazy, right?
Yeah. That's insane. So I did get to see video of them splashing down.
Yeah, I just
in the
saw
Gulf
that.
of Mexico. Dolphins were like
the Gulf of
showing up. The Gulf of America. And immediately when they got over onto land, they went to stretchers. Like they put them on stretchers and kind of had IVs hooked up. Like there was a lot going on there. And I wonder, like with the radiation, that's the part that intrigued me. Like, is there medication or IVs that's going to help them draw that out of
From
their
space
body.
sickness.
You know, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think like fantasizing about like going to Mars would be awesome,
Yeah.
but the amount of toll that would take on your body to travel through space,
How long does it take to get to Mars? Do we?
it depends. Remember we said it depends. It's either months or years,
Is it? I thought
right?
it was less
Up to
time than
3
that.
years or down to like several months. It's depending on the orbit of all the planets and all that good stuff, the time of year, the radiation belts that are going on, the gravitational pull, the orbits, all that stuff,
Typically 7 to 9 months.
or up to 3 years.
I
Right.
don't
Look it up.
I don't see
It depends on the time of when you're traveling and the magnetic belts. That's what I was trying to get at.
Uh-huh.
Around the Earth and around those different planets. But the 2 astronauts are back, right, as of yesterday, and it's a big deal. I'm curious to see what the recovery is like.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Like, that they're going to get studied up and down.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for the rest of their life, there's going to be issues, complications
Yeah.
with it.
I will say what brought them back is it's called the Dragon, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the SpaceX, so that's Tesla, right? That's
Yeah.
Elon Musk. Everybody in the left-leaning political sphere is like tearing Tesla up and down, right? Like,
Right.
what? Well, let's ban Tesla. We don't want Elon Musk and yada yada. Even though they were shouting for electric cars, for everybody, and now they hate it. But he's also the one that's helping recover
Yeah.
astronauts from space. It's a big deal. I think it's a big deal. Big deal. What's the significance
What's the significant
of just this event?
of the event? I think it's huge. I mean, like we said, the studies that are going to be done on them is going to be
Yeah,
a lot.
I think you think it'll affect travel to Mars, like the effect on the human body.
Okay. Let's talk about. Are we talking about like the colonization of Mars, supposedly?
I mean, that or just like the effects on people by the time they get to
Well,
Mars.
I guess we'll find out. I mean, once these people are like, and I hate to make them sound like lab rats, but once these people are studied, we'll have more answers to that question. But until then, I think, like, if you were given the opportunity to go to Mars, to be one of the ones that colonizes Mars, would you go?
Yeah, we've talked about this question before. Would I be the first person to go? I think it'd be a cool mission, but I think you also have to, in the back of your head, know that it's probably a one-way mission. Like,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
first. If
Well,
it's like
that's
a
what I'm kinda-
regular commercial thing,
No, I'm
if
not saying.
if I'm young enough, sure.
I'm not saying coming back. I'm saying, like, if you go, your new home is there. It's already been set
Yeah.
up, and you live there now.
If I was not married, not have a family, sure, I'd be the first one on that list, right? But now as
But
a
you wouldn't
as,
take your family.
as a husband, father, no, I wouldn't. Not first anyway.
I guess. Well, I mean, you are a pastor of a church.
Yeah, not
unless the
first.
whole church is going up there with you.
Yeah, yeah. Unless God says, "Hey, it's time to go to Mars," I don't see that happening. I don't think we're going to go to Mars as what we think we're going to go to Mars.
No.
I think it'll be more AI, robot driven than human driven.
Yeah.
I
What do you think? What do you think about the interplanetary colonization? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, does that affect Christ coming? Like, supposedly, we get to Mars, set up a colony on Mars before Christ comes back.
Yeah.
What
Does he
that
know?
look like?
Does he know where you are?
Well, no, I'm not asking if he knows where he's
Um,
God. He knows where we are. But, like, does that affect anything?
I don't think so. If this is going to sound weird, probably. Mormons have a thought
Here we go.
that when they die, if they are proven to be a good Mormon,
If you're one of the 144,000,
they
I
will
guess.
have a planet of their own, and they will populate it just as God did with a mother and
Now, when they say
weirdness.
God, though, they're not talking about
yeah,
Yahweh.
yeah. There's a whole lot there. I don't see in our scriptures anything about other planets, right?
Mhm.
I know that God created those planets, but He created one garden that was really good,
Yeah.
and that it was good for mankind to dwell. We don't see that anywhere else.
So
right?
you think, if I'm getting this right, that Christ will come back before we ever make it to another planet to start colonizing it?
I don't know that has any effect one way or the other.
I don't think it has any effect, but I think it's
Yeah.
very interesting to think about.
I don't think that we're meant to go to other planets. I think that
Mhm.
I think mankind has always wanted to explore and be a pioneer in different things.
Yeah.
I think space is just the next pioneer area, right? The next frontier.
Yeah.
I think that's just a part of mankind's urging to go and to make a name for himself. That's a shot out to the Old Testament, Babel, right? We want to do that. Man wants to be the conqueror, right?
Yeah.
That's our nature, right? To go and conquer and to do new things. I don't think that we're meant to, but I don't think that is. I don't think it's sinful to go and look at Mars and do all those things. But again, I don't think we're going to populate another planet like we dream about. I don't think it's going to be like. I really don't think it's going to be us, right? If that makes sense, like humankind.
Yeah.
I think it'll be more robotic AI conquering than
It's such an interesting thought,
mankind
though.
conquering. Yeah, I don't know why would we do that?
Well, I mean,
I think-
Musk thinks that there's only so many resources left here, and we've got to go somewhere else.
Yeah. So if you look at his X account, he always talks about population, right?
Yeah.
And the decline. Most countries are declining in population, which is a scary thing to think about.
Yeah.
If you're thinking in that realm, right? That once a population begins to decline, there's no way to turn back.
Yeah.
And we're a part of that. The U.S. is part of that, right? I think, is it Japan or China? One of those is like
Japan's
dropped
fertility rate
drastically.
is
Like
crazy.
they're not going to be able to recover.
No.
Eventually.
They actually are paying people to come over.
Yeah, and so Elon Musk is looking at the bigger picture, that kind of picture, right?
Yeah.
His thinking is way outside of my thinking, but he's worried about depopulation, and that we're going to have to find another home in order to repopulate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's a really cool thing to fantasize about. I don't think it's something that we need to fantasize about.
Yeah. I don't think we need to.
Yeah. If my hope is in Christ, right, I'm not worried about that so much. I can see the urgency of it, right? But again, no civilization has lasted forever, right? All of them
True.
have fallen. All the major superpowers have fallen.
I think, isn't it that every like 250 years a civilization falls? Something like that?
Oh, I don't know.
I've got to find that. Hold on. I got to find that.
Is it like just in theory, right? Or is it like, has it been studied like every time this happens?
I think it's literally been studied, but I'll have to find it.
Yeah.
You'll have to give me a minute. But on the colonization topic, it says supposedly NASA and SpaceX want the first human missions to Mars to happen
it's coming
in
quick.
the late 2030s or early 2040s. That's not far away.
No, it's coming quick. I mean, he really wants to put men and women on the planet. Again, I think it's cool.
The
to think
robotic
about.
missions will test the technology in the 2020s, so sometime at some point.
Yeah, I think. Well, we're not the only ones either. We have to say, like, the United States isn't the only one with a rover on Mars, right? China has a rover on Mars, so called. I haven't
Supposedly.
seen picture. I mean, I guess there was a picture
Looks
about
a little sketchy.
one of their things. I think man's ability to want to conquer is in space. There's so much junk in space right now from different countries that have gone. We're just now we keep pursuing it, right? Yeah, I don't think it's negatively. I don't think it's sinful, but I don't think it's like. I don't see us populating Mars because it's not inhabitable like Earth is. It's just not.
Yeah, I can't find what I was looking
Now,
for.
if we ever do the interstellar thing where we can go through a black hole, right, that wormhole, and see what's on the other side of another far galaxy, right, there may be a planet. But again, I don't think it's in the cards for us to inhabit other planets. Maybe that's like Debbie Downer, but I mean, I love space. I love the idea of going to space and doing all those things. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, there was another
in my
thing
timeline.
I had heard about a few years ago. Something about like a space hotel. Do you know anything about that?
Like it orbiting over Earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. Now that would be a fun family trip.
I would like to do the thing. I guess it costs $1 million, right? Origin, the Amazon dude Bezos' thing, his space technology stuff, where he flies commercially up into the stratosphere and then back down. And that'd be cool, but I'm not paying $1 million just to do that for a few seconds.
Unfortunately, I don't have $1 million to just drop on a random Tuesday to go to space for like an hour.
Get your bracket going. If you're listening, get your bracket going because tomorrow, Thursday, is the first games of round one.
I'll fill it out. I have not watched a single game.
I think the bigger question is Louisville going to go farther than Kentucky?
Ooh.
or is Kentucky going to go farther? I
What-
think that's the
What
question.
are their records? Do you know offhand?
Not off the top of my hand.
Like, or like what?
Louisville
Which
ended
team
with
is doing better?
Louisville ended better, but they got a worse seed in the tournament than
Uh-huh.
Kentucky. All the number 2s in their conferences got a 3 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Louisville got an 8 seed
Ooh.
compared to all the other number 2s in their own respective tournaments.
Yeah.
Like the committee's got a lot of explaining to do. Kentucky lost out. Like they just kept losing at the end of the season. They lost in their tournament, and they're still ranked higher than.
I think it's
Louisville.
just because it's Kentucky.
Yeah,
Like Kentucky
it
has
is.
such a winning record.
I think it is. I mean, it's just
Y-
it just happens.
And
But here's the thing: don't bet, but have fun with it.
Yeah, you're
Make
a
it
Louisville fan. How many championships has Louisville ever won?
3.
Okay, have they?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Their Louisville is a big name in college basketball, and it's a historic,
Like UK.
It's
as much as UK.
it's in the same conversation as UK, North Carolina,
Duke.
Indiana, right? It's a historical college that
Yeah.
have done really well. In the past, they haven't. Kentucky's done better. They have they have more championships, things like that. Kentucky is a Kentucky. It's a basketball state,
Yeah.
right? That kind of thing. But Louisville has always had a history of basketball, and they're in the conversation. They're in the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple wins, and so it's cool to cheer on your team.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what the ACC does compared to other conferences. But
Let's bring our brackets next week and
yeah,
compare.
to do it. Love God,
Love people.
make disciples.